Michael Reynolds observed the morning bustle of Portland Central Precinct with attentive eyes. After 12 years as an investigator, he knew every detail of the place. The smell of strong coffee mingled with the cheap perfume of the secretaries, the creak of the old wooden floor, the moisture stains on the ceiling that formed strange shapes. Everything was part of his routine. "Another case filed away, Reynolds?" asked Tyler, a rookie officer, as he placed a stack of documents on his desk. "Bureaucracy is the real villain in this country," replied Mike with a tired smile. "Worse than criminals are the forms." The morning followed its predictable course until a thunderous noise broke the monotony. The glass of the main window shuddered when something broke through the barrier and invaded the room. A majestic eagle, with a wingspan of almost 6 feet, flew over the desks, knocking down objects and scattering documents through the air. "What the hell is that?" shouted Chief Brian Thompson, coming out of his office with eyes wide open. Confusion took over the environment. Officers tried to protect themselves, secretaries screamed, and the eagle continued its chaotic flight. Amid the tumult, Mike remained motionless, observing something peculiar. The animal didn't seem disoriented, but determined. Suddenly, the eagle dove in his direction, landing on his desk with a dull thud. The bird's golden eyes fixed on his, for a moment that seemed eternal. There was something in that gaze that transcended animal instinct, a silent message, a warning. Before anyone could interfere, the eagle dropped a paper and took flight again, disappearing through the same window through which it had entered. Silence fell over the precinct as everyone watched Mike pick up the note. His hands trembled slightly. As he unfolded it, the content was simple but disconcerting. "Michael Reynolds, October 14th, the next day." "What does it say, Reynolds?" asked Chief Thompson, approaching cautiously. Mike extended the paper to his superior, noting a subtle change in his expression upon reading the content. It wasn't surprise or confusion, but something that resembled recognition. "Ignore this," said Thompson, returning the note with studied carelessness. "Probably some kind of bad joke. Get back to work, all of you." The others promptly obeyed. But Mike remained intrigued. There was something in the chief's gaze, a tension that contradicted his unconcerned words. "Brian, doesn't this seem strange to you? An eagle invading the precinct and delivering a note with my name?" The chief adjusted his tie, a nervous gesture that Mike knew well. "Reynolds, we have real cases to solve. Don't waste time on superstitions. This won't make you a better cop," he responded with unusual harshness, quickly walking away. At the end of the workday, Mike remained at the precinct after everyone had already left. The note in his hand seemed to weigh more with each passing hour. Why his name? Why tomorrow's date? And especially why the evasive reaction from the chief? Driven by growing restlessness, he decided to investigate on his own. If there was something to be discovered, he needed to start with the most obvious place, the old precinct archives. If a similar case had occurred before, it would be recorded somewhere. With determined steps, he went down to the basement where the cold cases were kept, not knowing that he was about to unearth secrets that many preferred to keep buried. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give a like. Tell us which city you're watching from. We continue. The precinct basement held decades of forgotten stories. Metal shelves extended like a labyrinth, housing dusty boxes and files yellowed by time. Mike turned on the weak light that barely illuminated the environment and began his search. Where to start, he thought, observing the infinity of documents. He decided to look for unsolved cases from the last 20 years. If there was a pattern, it would be there. After 2 hours of rummaging through papers, his eyes were burning and frustration was growing. That's when he noticed a box isolated in the farthest corner of the basement, as if someone had deliberately tried to hide it. The worn label simply said, "Special Cases, Restricted Access." "Interesting," he murmured, as he carefully opened the box. The contents made him freeze. There, organized chronologically, were records of unsolved disappearances, people who simply evaporated without leaving traces. The most disturbing thing was the pattern. Each victim had received a note similar to his before vanishing. A name and a date, nothing more. This can't be a coincidence, he said to himself, feeling his heart race. Most of the cases dated back 15 to 20 years. The investigations were conducted by a detective named Richard Martinez, who, according to the final notes, also mysteriously disappeared while following a lead. Among the evidence, a photograph caught his attention. It showed a man with his back turned, observing one of the scenes. Although his face wasn't visible, something stood out. A golden eagle-shaped pendant hanging around his neck. Mike photographed the documents with his cell phone and carefully put everything away. As he closed the box, he noticed something that had escaped him at first glance. A handwritten note on the inside of the lid. Foster connection. Check institutions. The handwriting appeared to be Richard Martinez's. The next day, still disturbed by his discoveries, Mike decided to seek help. He headed to the forensic psychology wing where Amelia Parker worked, a respected professional with whom he had collaborated on complex cases. "I need your opinion on something," he said, entering her room without ceremony. Amelia raised her eyes from the reports she was analyzing. At 45, she carried the weight of experience in her perceptive eyes and the discreet lines of expression. "Good morning to you too, Mike," she replied with irony. "What happened? You look like you haven't slept." "I haven't," he confessed, showing her the photos he'd taken of the files. "I found this yesterday, and this arrived for me." He handed her the Eagle's note and observed her reaction. Amelia examined everything with professional attention, her initial skepticism gradually transforming into concern. "This is disturbing," she finally admitted. "But it could just be an elaborate coincidence, someone trying to scare you." Then explained Chief Thompson's reaction. "He practically ordered me to forget about it." Amelia frowned. "All right, let's investigate. Who is this Foster mentioned in the notes?" "I don't know yet, but I'll find out," Mike replied, determined. "I need access to the system to research old charitable institutions and their sponsors." They worked together for hours, cross-referencing information and building a connection map. One name began to stand out: Anthony Foster, an influential businessman and philanthropist known for financing institutions supporting underprivileged children. "Here it is," said Amelia, pointing to the screen. "Over the last 30 years, Anthony Foster has financed dozens of institutions. And look at this. Several of them were sites of disappearances in the past." Mike felt a shiver run down his spine. "We need to visit these places. And maybe it's time to meet Mr. Foster in person." At that moment, his phone rang. It was Chief Thompson. "Reynolds, come to my office immediately," he ordered with a tense voice. "We have a problem." The chief's urgent tone only increased his uneasiness. As he said goodbye to Amelia, Mike didn't imagine that he was about to dive even deeper into a mystery that had already cost many lives. Upon entering Chief Thompson's office, Mike felt the atmosphere loaded with tension. His superior was pacing back and forth, his face contorted in a grave expression he rarely showed. "Close the door," he ordered without raising his eyes. Mike obeyed, preparing himself for the confrontation he knew was inevitable. "You were in the cold case archive last night?" It wasn't a question, but a statement. Thompson finally faced him. "What exactly are you looking for, Reynolds?" "The truth about the note I received, and about the others that came before mine." The chief visibly paled. "So you found the files," he sighed, letting himself fall into his chair. "I should have known. You've always been too persistent for your own good. Why did you hide this from me? Why file away disappearance cases as if they were irrelevant?" Thompson rubbed his face with his hands, suddenly looking much older. "Those weren't my decisions, Mike. Those orders came from above, a long time ago. Some cases are discouraged from being investigated." "Discouraged?" Mike raised his voice, indignant. "We're talking about missing people, Brian, and now it seems my name has been added to the list." The chief abruptly stood up and approached, lowering his tone as if afraid of being overheard. "Listen carefully. You're dealing with powerful people. People who can do much more than deliver mysterious notes. Richard Martinez was my friend, an excellent investigator, and he vanished without a trace when he started asking the same questions you're asking now." "So you knew," Mike accused. "You knew the whole story and still did nothing. I tried. Thompson slammed his fist on the desk forcefully. For years I tried to find out what happened to Richard, but all doors closed. Careers were destroyed, Mike. People lost everything for much less than what you're doing. A heavy silence settled between them. Mike processed the revelations, trying to fit the pieces of that dark puzzle together. "Who is Anthony Foster?" he finally asked. The chief seemed genuinely alarmed. "How did you get to him?" Richard Martinez's notes mentioned the name Foster. I researched and discovered connections between him and the disappearance locations. Thompson shook his head, defeated. Anthony Foster is practically untouchable. His family has been among the most influential in Portland for generations. He's funded political campaigns, built hospitals, orphanages. His reputation is impeccable. "Reputations can be manufactured," Mike retorted. "I need to talk to him." "No!" The chief grabbed his arm with surprising strength. "That's exactly what you shouldn't do. If Foster is really involved, approaching him would be professional suicide. Or worse. So you suggest I simply await my fate? That I wait to disappear like the others?" Thompson released his arm and walked to the window, looking outside for a few moments before turning back to Mike. "I'll cover for you to investigate discreetly. Nothing official, understood. If anyone asks, I'll say you're working on routine old cases." Mike nodded, grateful for the small victory. "What about Amelia Parker? She's already involved." "Keep her close. She's good at what she does, and, above all, she's trustworthy. But don't involve anyone else," the chief warned. "And Reynolds, be careful. Whatever you discover, share it only with me." As he left the office, Mike felt the weight of responsibility on his shoulders. He immediately returned to Amelia's office to update her on the conversation. "Thompson knows more than he's saying," she concluded after hearing his report, "but at least now we have his veiled permission to investigate. We need to be discreet. We'll start with the institutions linked to Foster, where disappearances occurred." Amelia nodded, her eyes reflecting determination. "I found something interesting while you were gone," she said, showing the computer screen. "Anthony Foster has a sister, Catherine Foster. She maintains a much more discreet profile, rarely appears in public, but from what I could gather, she's the one who effectively manages a large part of the family business." "A figure in the shadows?" Mike questioned, interested. "That makes her even more suspicious." "Exactly, and there's one more thing." Amelia enlarged a photograph on the screen. "This is the only recent image I found of her, at a charity event last year." Mike leaned in to see better and felt his blood freeze in his veins. On Catherine Foster's neck, almost hidden by the high collar of her dress, was a golden eagle-shaped pendant, and Claire's orphanage was an imposing building on the outskirts of Portland. Founded in the 80s with funding from the Foster Foundation, it had been closed 5 years ago, after allegations of administrative irregularities. According to the files found by Mike, 3 employees mysteriously disappeared while working there. "Melancholy place," commented Amelia as they walked through the abandoned garden. "It's hard to imagine children playing here." Mike observed everything with a critical eye. Using his contacts, he had obtained authorization for a property inspection, which gave them access to the deactivated building. 3 people vanished from here," he said, consulting his notes. "Mariana Costa, social worker, Paulo Ribeiro, janitor, and Teresa Almeida, nurse, all within a period of 2 months 17 years ago." And they all received the note. According to Richard Martinez's reports, yes. They entered the main building. The interior was deteriorated with clear signs of vandalism and abandonment. They followed the main corridor, their steps echoing off the empty walls. "What do you expect to find here after so long?" asked Amelia. "I'm not sure," admitted Mike. "Maybe a connection, something that escaped the previous investigation." They visited the dormitories, the cafeteria, and the old infirmary. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary for an abandoned building. It was in the administration office that they found something interesting, a mural covered by boards. "Why would someone block a mural?" questioned Mike, already removing the wooden planks. What they found behind was surprising. Dozens of photographs showing children with authorities and benefactors. In the center, A larger photo showed the orphanage's inauguration. Anthony? Foster smiled at the camera, cutting the symbolic ribbon. By his side, a young woman observed the scene with an indescribable expression. Catherine Foster, approximately 30 years old at the time. "She seems uncomfortable," observed. "Amelia, or guilty," added Mike. They photographed the mural and continued their exploration. In the basement, they found the old laundry, and next to it, a locked room. "Interesting," murmured Mike, examining the lock. "Why keep a room locked in an abandoned building?" Using his police skills, he managed to open the door. The interior was surprisingly clean, contrasting with the rest of the building. Tables arranged in a circle occupied the center, and strange symbols decorated the walls. "What is this?" asked Amelia, touching one of the symbols, a stylized eagle with open wings. "It looks like some kind of meeting room," replied Mike, photographing everything. "But not for normal orphanage activities." Upon closer examination, they discovered a hidden compartment under one of the tables. Inside, they found a record book with a list of names and dates. "Look at this." Mike flipped through the book to a specific page. "The names of the employees who disappeared are here, with the same dates of the notes they received. And there are other names," added Amelia, pointing to the page, "many others." At the end of the list, they saw something that shocked them. The name of Richard Martinez, the missing detective, followed by the date of his disappearance, and a few pages ahead was Mike's name, with the date of the previous day, when he received the note. "This isn't a coincidence," said Amelia, her voice trembling. "They already knew you would come. They were waiting for you." Before they could discuss further, they heard a noise on the upper floor, heavy and determined footsteps. "We're not alone," whispered Mike, automatically reaching for his weapon. Quickly stored the book in his backpack and turned off the lights. The footsteps were approaching the basement. By the sound, there were at least 3 people. "We have to get out of here," whispered Amelia. Mike pointed to a small window near the ceiling. "Through there. I'll help you up first." With effort, they managed to escape through the narrow opening, moments before the door to the room was opened. From outside, hidden among the bushes, they saw 3 men in suits examining the place. One of them was talking on the phone. "They were here," said the man. "Yes, ma'am, they took the book, understood. We'll intercept them." Mike and Amelia exchanged worried looks and silently moved away, running toward the car parked 2 blocks. "We need to analyze this book," said Mike as he drove back to the city, "and then talk to Chief Thompson." "Mike," Amelia's voice was serious, "I think we just confirmed that there's an organization behind these disappearances, and they know we're investigating." "Yes," he agreed, looking in the rearview mirror to make sure they weren't being followed. "The question now is, how much time do we have before they come after us?" What they didn't imagine is that the answer to that question would be much faster and more violent than they could anticipate. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give a like. Tell us which city you're watching from. We continue. The next morning dawned grey in Portland, with a fine rain that seemed to foreshadow the events to come. Mike arrived early at the precinct, the record book secure in his bag. He had spent the night analyzing it, discovering disturbing patterns in the dates and names listed. "We need to talk," he said when he found Amelia in the hallway. "I discovered something important." They headed to an empty meeting room, where Mike spread his notes across the table. "These disappearances aren't random," he explained, pointing to his connection map. "All the names in the book have something in common. At some point, these people investigated the activities of the Foster Foundation or had access to confidential information." Amelia examined the notes, impressed with Mike's meticulous work. "So it's a silencing system," she concluded. "But why? What are they hiding that justifies so many disappearances?" "I still don't know, but I'm sure the answer lies with Catherine. Foster, all paths lead to her." At that moment, Mike's cell phone vibrated. It was a message from Chief Thompson. "Come to the parking lot now, alone." "Strange," he commented, showing the message to Amelia. "Why the parking lot?" "I have a bad feeling about this," she replied, frowning. "It could be a trap, Or maybe he has information he doesn't want to share inside the precinct, pondered Mike. Either way, I need to go. Keep analyzing the book. Look for patterns in the dates. There might be a cycle or ritual. He went down to the parking lot. Alert to any suspicious movement, he found Thompson standing near his car, visibly nervous. What happened? Asked Mike as he approached. I received a call, replied the chief, looking around as if afraid of being observed. Catherine Foster wants to meet you personally. Mike felt a chill run down his spine. How does she know about me? Don't be naive, Reynolds, replied Thompson impatiently. They know everything that happens in this city. The question is, why does she want to talk to you? Maybe because we discovered more than we should, suggested Mike. We found a record book at St. Clair's orphanage. There are dozens of names, including mine. The chief turned pale. You went to the orphanage? Damn it, Reynolds. I said to be discreet. And we were. But someone followed us there. They were waiting for us. Thompson ran his hand over his face, visibly disturbed. This is worse than I imagined. Catherine Foster isn't someone who makes social invitations. If she wants to see you, it's because... He couldn't finish the sentence. A deafening bang shook the parking lot when Mike's car exploded in a ball of fire, sending shrapnel in all directions. The force of the explosion threw both men to the ground. Dazed, Mike got up with difficulty, his ears ringing. He saw Thompson, fallen near him, injured but conscious. Sirens began to sound as police officers ran to the scene of the incident. You understand now? Shouted Thompson as he was being aided. This isn't a joke. They'll try to eliminate you. In the hours that followed, the precinct transformed into a chaos of forensic investigators and security officers. Mike was examined by paramedics, but refused to go to the hospital. The attack had only strengthened his determination. You're off the case, announced the acting chief, appointed while Thompson was hospitalized. This is clearly personal now. I can't risk other lives. With all due respect, sir, if I leave the case, other people will continue to disappear, Mike rebutted. This is much bigger than an attack against me. My decision is made, Reynolds. Hand over your badge and your gun. You're suspended until further notice. Reluctantly, Mike obeyed, knowing this wouldn't prevent him from continuing to investigate on his own. He found Amelia at the precinct exit, her face reflecting genuine concern. I heard about the explosion. Are you okay? Physically, yes, he replied, but I was suspended. That complicates things, she observed. What will we do now? Mike looked at her intently. Catherine Foster wants to meet me, and I think it's time we accept the invitation. That's crazy, Amelia protested. After what happened, it would be like walking into the lion's den. Exactly why we need to go, argued Mike. They tried to intimidate me, they failed. Now they tried to eliminate me and also failed. Catherine Foster wants answers as much as we do, and I think it's time to confront her directly. Amelia hesitated, clearly torn between reason and loyalty. If we're going to do this, we need a plan, she finally said. And protection. Mike nodded, already formulating strategies in his mind. First, we need to find out where to meet her, and then prepare our own game. It's time to take this investigation to the next level. The Foster mansion stood majestically, in Portland's most exclusive neighborhood, surrounded by high walls and an ostentatious security system. Mike and Amelia observed the property from a distance, studying the movement of the security guards. How are we going to get in? Asked Amelia. The place looks like a fortress. We're not going to sneak in, replied Mike with an enigmatic smile. We're going through the front door. Hours earlier, Mike had made a surprising call. Using the number found in the orphanage records, he directly contacted Catherine Foster's office. Surprisingly, she agreed to receive them that same afternoon. I still think this could be a trap, insisted Amelia as they walked to the main gate. It probably is, agreed Mike. But sometimes you need to enter the lion's den to discover its secrets. Besides, I've taken precautions. Before leaving, Mike had sent digitized copies of all his discoveries to a journalist friend, with instructions to publish them if he didn't hear from him in the next 24 hours. The security guard at the entrance examined their documents with suspicion, but they were expected. After a thorough search, They were led through impeccably maintained gardens to the entrance of the mansion. The interior was an ostentatious display of power and wealth. A valuable artwork adorned the walls, and antique furniture composed an environment that blended classic elegance and authority. "Mrs. Foster will receive you in the library," informed a stern-faced housekeeper, guiding them through silent corridors. The library was spacious, with shelves that reached the ceiling. In the center, seated in a leather armchair, was Catherine Foster. At 60, she maintained an austere beauty, her hair perfectly arranged in a silver bun. Her eyes, however, were as cold as steel. "Investigator Reynolds," she said with a calculated smile, "and Dr. Parker. Finally, we meet." "Mrs. Foster," replied Mike, maintaining his composure, "thank you for receiving us." "How could I refuse, after all the effort you made to get my attention?" She indicated the armchairs in front of her. "Please, sit down." They obeyed, conscious of the palpable tension in the environment. Mike noticed the golden eagle pendant hanging from Catherine's neck, identical to the one in the photograph. "Beautiful pendant," he commented casually. "Does it have any special meaning?" A flash of something indefinable passed through her eyes. "It's a family heirloom. An eagle represents vision, power, and purpose," she responded calmly. "But we're not here to discuss jewelry, are we?" "No," agreed Mike. "We're here to talk about disappearances. People who received mysterious notes and then vanished without a trace." "A serious accusation," replied Catherine, showing no surprise. "And I imagine you believe I have some connection to these incidents?" "We know there's an organization behind this," intervened Amelia. "One that uses philanthropic institutions as cover, and all of them have a connection to your family." Catherine rose gracefully and walked to one of the windows. "You know, Dr. Parker, philanthropy often attracts suspicion. When someone does good, people always look for hidden motives." She turned to face them. "My family has helped Portland for generations. We've built hospitals, schools, orphanages. We've given hope to those who had nothing." "And you also maintain a list of people marked for disappearance," added Mike, deciding to play his cards on the table. "How would you explain that?" To their surprise, Catherine smiled. "You're really brave, investigator, or extremely foolish." She pressed a discreet button on her desk. "But I fear we're beyond the point of simple explanations." The library door opened and two burly men entered. Mike immediately recognized them as the same ones they had seen at the orphanage. "My guests are leaving," instructed Catherine. "Please make sure they reach their destination." "What does this mean?" questioned Amelia, rising alarmed. "It means, my dear doctor, that you've discovered only fragments of a much greater truth. A truth that you're not prepared to understand," replied Catherine with disturbing serenity. "Under other circumstances, I could simply let you leave with a warning. But your friend here received the eagle's call. And when the eagle calls, fate is already sealed." Mike realized he had underestimated the situation. This wasn't just an ordinary criminal conspiracy, but something much more complex and sinister. "You won't get away with this," he warned as the men approached. "People know what we've discovered. If anything happens to us, the truth will come out." Catherine touched her eagle pendant, an almost reverent gesture. "Oh, my dear, you still haven't understood. This isn't about getting away with anything." Her eyes shone with an unsettling intensity. "It's about a greater purpose, a purpose that has existed for much longer than you can imagine." Before they could react, the men grabbed Mike and Amelia. They tried to resist but were quickly subdued and dragged out of the library. The darkness was almost absolute inside the van that transported them. Mike tried to calculate the time and direction, but after several purposeful turns, he had completely lost his sense of orientation. Beside him, Amelia remained in tense silence, her shoulder touching his, a comforting contact in their desperate situation. "You won't get away with this," said Mike, trying to establish some kind of communication with their captors. "Quiet," ordered one of the men. "Your situation is complicated enough already." After what seemed like an eternity, the vehicle finally stopped. When the doors opened, Mike recognized where they were. An old abandoned industrial complex on the outskirts of Portland. The perfect place to make someone disappear. They were escorted inside a high-ceilinged warehouse, its windows covered with boards that let in only slivers of light. In the center, several chairs formed a circle. The walls displayed the same symbol they had seen at the orphanage, the eagle with open wings. "What is this place?" asked Amelia, her voice betraying nervousness despite her attempt to appear firm. No one answered. They were forced to sit in two chairs, their wrists and ankles bound with high-resistance plastic ties. "Don't fight against it," Reynolds advised. One of the men, noticing Mike's subtle attempts to test the resistance of the restraints, "You'll only make things more difficult." For almost an hour they were left alone in the warehouse, with only a silent guard at the door. Mike used this time to examine the environment, looking for escape routes or objects they could use as weapons. Nothing promising. "They're leaving us anxious on purpose," he whispered to Amelia. "It's an interrogation tactic." "But what do they want to know?" she asked. "They already discovered that we know about the disappearances." "Maybe they want to understand how much we've discovered about the purpose behind it all." The sound of approaching vehicles interrupted the conversation. Minutes later, the warehouse door opened and Catherine Foster entered, accompanied by 4 people, 2 men and 2 women, all wearing formal clothes and grave expressions. "I hope you've been treated adequately," said Catherine, walking until she stood before them. "Unnecessary violence is not part of our methods." "Kidnapping and intimidation are," Mike retorted with irony. Catherine smiled slightly. "Self-preservation, investigator, a concept you should understand." She gestured to her companions, who occupied some of the empty chairs in the circle. The scene resembled a kind of improvised tribunal. "Let's get straight to the point," continued Catherine. "You discovered the record book, saw the names, the dates. What else do you know?" "We know that you mark people for disappearance," replied Mike. "People who investigate too much, who ask inconvenient questions about the Foster Foundation's activities." "Simplistic, but essentially correct," agreed Catherine. "And what do you think happens to these people?" Amelia and Mike exchanged confused looks. "Considering they were never found," Amelia began. "The obvious conclusion," Catherine interrupted with a gesture of disapproval, always thinking of the worst-case scenario. She walked slowly, around the circle, occasionally touching her eagle pendant, as if the gesture brought her clarity. "What would happen, Investigator Reynolds, if I told you that the people on our list are not eliminated, but rather recruited?" Mike frowned, trying to understand. "Recruited for what?" "For something much greater than their previous lives," replied one of the men beside Catherine, "for a purpose that transcends everyday pettiness." There was something familiar about that man's voice. Mike narrowed his eyes, trying to see his face better in the dim light of the warehouse. "Richard Martinez?" he asked, incredulous. The man approached, revealing himself in the light that entered through the cracks. It was indeed Richard Martinez, the detective who had disappeared years ago, older, with graying hair, but unmistakably him. Around his neck a golden eagle pendant identical to Catherine's. "Hello, Mike," said Richard with a calm smile. "I confess I expected it would be you to follow in my footsteps eventually." "But how?" Mike stammered, stunned. "Everyone thought you were—" "Out of circulation," Richard completed. "And I am in a way. My old life ended when I received the eagle's call, just like yours." "I don't understand," intervened Amelia. "What are you talking about? What organization is this?" Catherine returned to the center of the circle. "We are the Guardians of the Eagle, Dr. Parker, a brotherhood that has existed in secret for centuries, dedicated to protecting and preserving knowledge that the world is not ready to accept." "What kind of knowledge?" asked Mike, increasingly confused. "The kind that changes the very nature of reality," replied Catherine. "Knowledge about perception, premonition, and connections that transcend linear time as we understand it." One of the other members approached, carrying an engraved wooden box. Catherine opened it reverently, revealing an object that made Mike freeze. It was a golden feather, identical to those of the eagle that had entered the precinct. "Eagles are more than animals, investigator," explained Catherine, her voice taking on an almost mystical tone. "They are messengers between realities, capable of perceiving patterns invisible to ordinary eyes. They select those with the necessary sensitivity to understand the greater truth. People like you." Mike shook his head, resisting that fantastic explanation. "This is madness. You're some kind of cult." "Call it what you will," said Richard. "But you felt it too, didn't you? That connection when the eagle looked into your eyes, that feeling that it knew exactly who you were, that it could see through you." The words hit Mike like a blow. Indeed, that sensation had haunted him since the incident. The heavy air of the warehouse seemed to make breathing difficult as Mike tried to assimilate everything he was hearing. It was too much to accept. A secret society of people selected by mystical eagles, knowledge that transcended reality. It seemed like the delusion of fanatics. "Even if I believed this story," he finally said, "it doesn't justify kidnappings, intimidation, and trying to kill me with a bomb in my car." Catherine raised her eyebrows. "Bomb?" She exchanged genuinely confused looks with the other members. "We didn't send any bomb, investigator." "Don't lie," Mike raised his voice. "My car exploded in the precinct parking lot." Richard approached, serious. "Mike, the Guardians of the Eagle don't physically eliminate anyone. That goes against our most fundamental principles." "Then who tried to kill me?" A heavy silence settled over the environment, broken only when the warehouse door opened again. Chief Thompson entered, walking with difficulty due to injuries from the explosion, but with a gun firmly pointed at the group. "I tried," he admitted, surprising everyone. "And unfortunately, I failed." "Brian?" Mike couldn't believe it. "Why?" Thompson advanced slowly, keeping the gun raised. "Why do you think?" He addressed Catherine with contempt. "To protect your precious secret, to keep the truth hidden from the world." Catherine remained impassive. "Thompson was never selected by the Eagle," she explained to Mike and Amelia. "But he discovered us through Richard, his former partner. Since then, he's become obsessed with our brotherhood." "Obsessed?" Thompson laughed bitterly. "I saw what you really are. I saw the power you hide. And for years, I waited for my chance. He tries to imitate our methods," added Richard. "The note's the Eagle's, but it's nothing more than a forgery." Mike began to understand the situation. "You intercepted the investigations about the disappearances, not to protect the society, but to try to discover more about them." "And to ensure no one got to them before me," confirmed Thompson, pride distorting his features. "I knew that eventually someone like you, persistent enough, might discover the truth. That's why I tried to keep you away. When that didn't work, I had to be more direct. I put my name in the record book," concluded Mike, "to attract their attention to me. And it worked." Thompson smiled, moving to stand behind Catherine. "Finally, I have all of you gathered." "What do you want, Thompson?" asked Catherine, her calm unshakable even with the gun pointed at her. "What I've always wanted," he replied, pressing the gun barrel against her head. "The knowledge you protect, the true power of the Eagles." Amelia took advantage of the distraction to discreetly work on her restraints, using a small blade hidden in her boot that the captors hadn't found. Mike noticed her movement and continued the conversation to keep Thompson's attention. "You really think you'll get what you want this way?" he questioned. "By threatening them?" "They left me no choice," Thompson replied bitterly. "I spent years trying to prove my worth. I studied the patterns, followed the clues, but the Eagle never chose me." "Because it's not something you can force," explained Catherine serenely, even with the gun pressed against her head. "The choice isn't ours, nor the Eagle's. It's something much greater." At that instant, a familiar sound cut through the air, the powerful beating of wings. Everyone looked up when the warehouse roof shuddered with an impact. One of the tiles shifted, and through the holes in the ceiling, the golden afternoon light illuminated the environment in golden beams. "No," whispered Thompson, his face turning pale. "Not now." The noise intensified. More tiles fell as the same eagle Mike had seen at the precinct burst through the roof, its majestic wings opening fully as it dove toward the group. Thompson panicked, firing upward. The thunder of the shots echoed through the warehouse, but the eagle dodged with supernatural agility, descending in a spiral until it landed exactly between Mike and Amelia. time seemed to freeze. The eagle turned to Thompson, its golden eyes fixed on the corrupt chief who instinctively backed away. In that moment of distraction, Amelia managed to free herself completely and, in a quick movement, kicked the gun from Thompson's hand. Chaos ensued. The Guardians took the opportunity to react, subduing Thompson, who, without his weapon, didn't offer much resistance. Amelia freed Mike, who immediately ran to help contain the ex-chief. "It's over, Brian," said Mike as Richard handcuffed Thompson. "You're going to answer for all of this." The eagle remained motionless, watching the scene like a silent sentinel. When everything calmed down, it turned its attention to Mike, approaching with deliberate steps. "She came for you," said Catherine softly, "as we knew she would." The bird stopped in front of Mike, its penetrating eyes seeming to see beyond his physical existence. With a delicate movement, it dropped a golden feather at his feet. "The call has been confirmed," announced Richard. "The choice has been made." Mike looked at Amelia, who was observing everything with a mixture of fascination and incredulity. "And if I refuse?" asked Mike, turning to Catherine. "You can return to your previous life if you so wish," she replied. "Unlike what Thompson believed, we don't force anyone. The choice always was and always will be yours. But once the eagle has chosen you, something in you has already changed. You'll never see the world the same way again." Mike bent down and picked up the golden feather, feeling a strange vibration upon touching it. "What about Amelia?" he asked, looking at the friend who had accompanied him this far. Catherine smiled. "Each person's path is unique, investigator. Some are chosen to know the truth, others to guard it, and still others to test it. Each role is essential in the grand design." The eagle, having fulfilled its mission, moved toward the opening in the roof. Before taking flight, it looked one last time at Mike, as if sealing a silent pact between them. Then, with a powerful impulse, it rose to the skies, disappearing into the golden immensity of the Portland sunset. Michael Reynolds remained standing, the feather in his hand, and his heart filled with questions. He knew he was facing a choice that would change everything: embrace the unknown or return to the comfort of ignorance, the same choice that Richard Martinez had faced years before. As the twilight tinted Portland's sky with its dramatic colors, the investigator understood that regardless of the path he chose, one truth would remain unchanged. He had crossed a point of no return. The world he knew before, simple, predictable, linear, would never exist for him again. The eagle had made its call, and now in the silence of his heart, Mike needed to find his answer. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give a like. Tell us which city you're watching from.